welcome. My name is Karan Hardiman. I'm the Vice President of Global Talent Excellence at Residio, and I'm excited about having a great conversation today, especially because it is Pride Month. And so this is our opportunity to talk about the intersection between the LGBTQA and diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is my honor to partner in this conversation with Gabe Hagen, who runs Brick Road Coffee. So I just want to talk a little bit about who you are. So give an introduction, and let's talk about how you are driving impact in the community with the work that you're driving here at the coffee shop.
Awesome, thank you. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. My name is Gabe Hagen. I am the co-founder of Brick Road Coffee out here in Tempe. We started about 3 years ago now.
Okay.
And we are an inclusive community space that serves coffee is kind of how I like to frame it.
Great.
And so yeah, we one thing that was really important to me when we started this journey was focusing on making sure that the space felt open to everybody.
Okay.
And making sure that it was something that could cultivate that sense of belonging that is so often, I think, forgotten in a lot of spaces.
Yeah, so belonging is a great way to kind of start the conversation. I was looking at your mission, right, to be more than just a fabulous little coffee shop, but really to be create a place where the community intersects, connects, and supports each other in their individual goals. So talk to me a little bit about how you came about the mission, because that's hefty, right? It's hefty.
It is, and I firmly believe missions should be aspirational, right? It's something that we should always be striving towards, and it's something that we'll always be working to improve ourselves on, better ourselves with. But that mission really came from recognizing everything that kind of transpired, especially over these last few years.
Okay. Yes.
And how can I use what I want to do and help elevate those that really have those stories to share and really are the voices that need to be heard. Like at the end of the day, I'm still a cis white man, and my voice really should be on the back end of a lot of conversations. So Brick Road is really meant to be more of a catalyst to create space where people can come together and create that collective thought and really find ways to solve a lot of the problems we're facing today.
Yeah, great. So I appreciate that clarity of what your mission is, and you talked about safe space. So it's Pride Month. Yes. So the first thing I want to ask you is what does Pride Month mean to you?
Oh, Pride Month for me, it's a time to reflect. It's a time to reflect on the history of where we've come from. I think oftentimes we see what Pride is today, and we think that these rights have been our rights for forever and ever, and really our history with these rights is very short-lived. I mean, marriage equality is 2015, and that's still up in the air at times. So I think for me it's really about reflecting and how can I help provide a deeper education for the community on something that they may not normally know. I know I'm still learning a ton of queer history, and I think that's really important when it comes to Pride, to be prideful of where we came from, but also inspiring us on how we can move forward.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about your inspiration around Brick Road and the communities that you serve, right? You said safe space. When I was reading and kind of learning a little bit more about you, you talked about the LGBTQ and the sober community. Yes. So talk to me a little bit about why those two specifically.
Within the queer community, a lot of our history is done within spaces that are traditionally 21 up. They're in the bars, they're in the clubs, they're the nightclub spaces, which those spaces are incredibly important for our community to have those safe spaces together. I looked back at my childhood, and I remember wanting and craving that connection and that community before I was able to go to those spaces. So for me, it was very important to create a space that didn't have an age limit on the door, that really could welcome everybody. So anybody can come in, get a cup of coffee. It's super approachable. And when you're going through that journey of discovering who you are, oftentimes it can be intimidating, and if you go to a space that's specifically like a queer nightclub, sometimes that feels like you're outing yourself. Okay. Whereas if you're just grabbing a cup of coffee, you're just going and dipping your toe in the water maybe, and just seeing what that community looks like. So
well, welcoming is something it is. I walked through the door and I felt welcome just coming into here. So you have definitely established that culture here. So let's talk a little bit about your vision and mission, right? So how has the vision changed since you started, right? I kind of highlighted it earlier about the safe spaces and so forth, but how has it changed, and what's the vision going forward?
Yeah, a big part of my history was finding that safe space, which coffee shops, even back when I was younger, they were the alternative scene, or like someplace that kind of the outcasts could kind of get together. So that was a really big inspiration of like that vibe that I was looking for to create here with Brick Road. When we moved to Tempe, one of the things that really surprised both my husband and I is Tempe is a pretty well-known progressive city for Arizona, and there was just a desert of outwardly facing queer spaces, and so that was kind of how we stepped into what we did. What we didn't envision initially was how much of a political voice was needed from a small business owner. And that's something that is definitely that has kind of crafted where we've come and where we probably will continue to go, because we realize the power of our voice in spaces that haven't been, whether it be the local chambers, whether it be in leadership organizations like this. It's just making sure that we're able to take a seat at that table and really make sure that our community is providing a loud voice to make impact change throughout.
You know, and Valley Leadership really focuses on how we continue to make sustainable change in Arizona, and it seems like that is definitely something that you're driving. But you also mentioned about having a seat at the table, right? Help us understand, you know, that could be hard to get to, but it's also hard to keep, right? And for your voice to be heard. So can you kind of frame that for us? How did you get that seat at the table and get your voice to be heard?
It's a fine line, right? Like, one of the things that I've had to learn personally through this journey, it's very easy to walk into a room and be like, this is all wrong, and yell at people and be like, we're gonna do that. But you're not gonna get invited after that conversation. Like, that's gonna be a one and done. You're a firecracker. So it's finding ways to be strategic, to be thoughtful, and to be persistent too. There are times where there have been seats that have been claimed to be available for us, but then the meeting invite doesn't get sent, or they happen to forget our email, or they typoed it. But it's being persistent, and it's holding through to make sure that they really know, like, you're serious. You're not just here for the performative aspect. You're not here for that. You're really here to be a trusted source for them to hopefully want to learn and improve. I feel like so much of the conversation around DE&I really does start from a foundation of building trust. And I think when you look at the principles of doing, like Valley Leadership has, yes, I know.
You took it from me. That was going to be my next piece.
I did. But building trust really is that foundational piece. I think that's where we're at when it comes to DE&I work. It's showing that we can have these conversations and allowing people to come into a vulnerable conversation, knowing that, like, well, just as an example, when I started Brick Road, I mean, even being a member of the LGBTQ+ community, I still had a learning journey to go on to understand pronouns and understand all of the new ways that people are expressing themselves, and they're all valid ways. It was me that didn't understand them. So it was the work I had to do, but that meant I had to put myself in a vulnerable position. I had to go to trusted people and be able to be vulnerable and ask, like, hey, I want to understand. Help me understand. And when you go into a conversation with that and you establish that trust with people, that conversation is a lot easier to have, and it's able to produce a much more productive and sustainable outcome.
I mean, you hit it. One of the things I was going to talk about was the building trust, one of the principles in Valley Leadership principles. But the other piece is integrity, right? I mean, you talked about it. That going in spaces you may not know, you have to really try to pause yourself to understand different perspectives. Potentially checking your biases at the door so that you could truly be open to understand different perspectives and so forth. And so I appreciate that, because again, relationships are important, and being able to move what we want to move forward in Arizona, from what you're doing, from a variety of different other aspects that we're doing. Trust is important, right? And relationships are trust, and we can't do it by ourselves. And I love that you mentioned diversity, equity, inclusion, because that is truly the foundation of this work, right? It really is. And at the end of the day, relationships and trust are the key pillars to help us move this forward. So completely agree with you on that. So talk to me a little bit about your mission statement, right? right? We all travel on our own paths in lives, laying one brick at a time and taking each turn as it comes. Like, come on now, like that is not your typical mission statement. So talk to me a little bit about how you came up with that and the purpose of it.
So I'll be fully transparent. That was definitely something that came from my husband. During one of our many hour-long brainstorming sessions about what this place meant to us. And really what that kind of boiled down to was we knew we wanted to be intentional about every step that we took. It's very easy, especially when you're in business, and as we're getting into more of a mature business, I'm finding out it's very easy to focus on what's, that 3-year plan, that 5-year plan, that 10-year plan. And sometimes that will oftentimes feel like it boxes you into, you have to make this decision. This helps reframe that. It helps me understand where we've come from, and it helps me understand that listening to those voices that are around me are really important to know when I may need to start veering a path off in a different direction. It doesn't mean I'm drastically changing my 5 or 10-year plan, but it means that I'm listening to those around me to make sure that I'm focusing on the here and now and what's needed here and now, and how can I make sure that all of those pieces pave this beautiful path forward.
So how do you go about getting those voices, right? And helping you continue to align to your mission, but also making sure that mission is still relevant to support the community that you're focusing on?
That was a lot of groundwork in the beginning. So that vulnerability I speak of, that was so incredibly important. I put myself in a lot of spaces that I didn't feel like I was ready for. Maybe it was that imposter syndrome, or like, I just own a coffee shop. What am I doing in this space with all these people that own like big businesses and stuff like that? But I have a corporate background, so I do have some experience in those spaces. But doing it on my own was definitely challenging. But what that allowed me to do, it allowed me to go in there and go in really with that vulnerability and that mask kind of removed, where I could ask people and just be like, hey, this is where I'm at, this is where I'm trying to go. I really respect what you've done. How can I learn from you? And when you put yourself in that vulnerable position, so many people are willing to help you along the way. You just have to ask.
Yeah, that's very true. So I want to shift a little bit around kind of your approach to diversity, equity, inclusion. You mentioned it earlier. And I'm a true believer that when we think about the works that we're driving, specifically sustainable impact in the community, you cannot leave out the diversity, equity, inclusion piece of it. So how do you embed that into what you're driving here at your coffee shop? And how does that help you make what you're driving sustainable from an impact perspective?
Oh, that's a big one. Really embedding it comes down to listening. I think before I can do anything else, I need to listen to my staff. They're going to be the ones that really are living that front line. When you talk about front line of workforce today, like we have entry-level workforce, they're struggling with so many different issues, whether it be just how to pay their rent, how to pay their mortgage, all of these things. So it's just really understanding how to hold an honest dialogue. That's going to do so much to build that inclusion. When you can have an honest dialogue with your staff, they're going to tell you what they need. They're going to tell you where their pain points are, and that's going to help you really focus how you craft your entire system that you're bringing your culture in, whether it be your staff or your customers. It really helps you, if you want it to. It really helps you. Let's be clear. Not everybody wants to, because it's expensive. But if you want to, it really helps you kind of drive the direction of where you're going. When you incorporate those voices, it is going to by default, it's going to make it feel more inclusive because they're going to feel heard. And when you can't do something, like, trust me, they've all asked for $40 an hour minimum wage. I would love to, but I show them the numbers. So I'm not just saying no, I'm saying, hey, this is where we're at. This is how much money I'll have. And if we do this, this is how soon we'll be closed. But it's being honest and transparent about it and never just like shutting it down. Everybody that works for me is an adult. And I do believe that when you treat everybody with that respect, that will help add to that system of inclusion and really making people feel like they belong.
And I think, so this is a space that I work in every day, is around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I think there's a couple of things that you said that really resonate. One is the respect piece, right? Doesn't matter what level of the organization, when we respect each other, right, people want to come and run through mountains for you. I think the other piece is giving individuals a platform to share their voice, right? And being the voice for those that may not feel comfortable. And so how do you represent that voice is understanding your employee base, taking time to get to know them, understand what they need, because what you may need and what I may need as an employee is it may be drastically different. And so this is not a peanut butter spread solution. It's really taking the time to get to know each one of your employees or the customers that you serve, because the more you understand them, the more you can provide to them what they actually need, right? And that's what you were just sharing, and I love that. So I'm going to shift around, how does diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and racial justice, right? I know, the term, racial justice, right? And so here at Valley Leadership, I run, I'm the chair of our racial justice impact team, and I've been doing it for a while, and really excited about the work that we're driving in this space. But I also believe that racial justice is truly, it's an intersection piece to a variety of different things, right? When you think about education, when you think about a community, when you think about, workforce and employment, when you think about health, you cannot think about racial justice. So talk to me a little bit about how you think about racial justice and the work that you're driving here in the community.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you think about it, racial justice and the LGBTQ plus inclusion that we're striving for, they're both aiming to achieve the same thing, right? Equality. They're trying to eliminate that discrimination that exists. It's really a shared experience in a lot of ways because of that intersectionality that you speak about. So much of the experience really comes down to who that person is, and that crosses off in so many different ways. I think for me, the biggest difference between those two experiences, and this isn't exactly what you asked, but the biggest difference is when you look at the experience through the racial justice lens, that is like a generational trauma scenario, right? We have been experiencing and living through all of these events that have really, since our country's founding and even before, that we're trying to reconcile today. When you look at the queer experience, it's a little bit different, because each one of those kind of starts, for that individual, it starts at their coming out, or when they identify their identity, and so that definitely changes the conversation in a sense, but they're both ultimately trying to get that same goal. When you boil it down to that point, what I try to focus on here is trying to make sure that I will always understand kind of the intersectionality of the two.
Let's talk about you as a leader.
Yeah.
Right? So you are a leader here in the community, you're a leader here at the coffee house. Like, what are some of the things that you could really challenge leaders in driving impact in the community? Because saying you have the title is one thing, but action is another. So talk to me, if you were talking to a leader, what advice would you give them to make change in the community?
Oh, I think leadership is a unique perspective. I firmly subscribe to there's leadership at every level. Okay. You don't need a title to be a leader. You don't need a role to be a leader. Every individual can be a leader. And I think when you distill it down to that level of leadership, it's really empowering people to understand how and when to use their voice. Okay. And I think when you can help coach people or guide people or just help them understand the power behind their story, that's really where a lot of leadership drives from. You can get a lot of support, whether it be leading a team, just by sharing your story, sharing your why. I know one of the biggest things for me in trying to motivate my team is telling them why I started Brick Road. Why did I form it? Why am I doing what I'm doing? It's that storytelling. That's what that leadership is there. And that enables them to hopefully understand the power of their story and then drive change, whether it be behind the bar here at Brick Road or out in the world, and understanding that like their lived experience is valid, it's a valid perspective, and there's a lot of conversations that need that perspective to be heard. That's how we can make impactful change. That's really how we can drive the world that we want to see is just sharing our experiences and saying like, hey, this is what I went through, but like we could make this better.
Right,
like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So leadership really is a lot of storytelling, and it's just a lot of like connecting with other individuals to me.
And so I agree completely, and I say yes, and I want to click on that a little bit. I also believe it's really about also leaders demonstrating the behaviors that they want to see.
100%.
Right? Storytelling is so important, giving people space is so important, but I also believe individuals want to see leaders show up
That's true.
in the way that they are articulating, right? In the way that they, want to create culture. It's really about the behaviors as well, and demonstrating those behaviors that you want to see.
100%. I guess that should go without saying, but you're right.
I gotta call it out.
It
I have
does
to call it
require
out.
saying, if I was sharing a story about how I want to pay more than, and then I was paying under minimum wage, that would be
Right.
two different actions.
Right.
But no, it's very true. Those actions are so important, and I think any natural leader is going to exude that. They're going to exude the culture, that community that they want to experience. They're going to be able to. I always like to think like if you're a really, really natural leader, it's an infectious trait.
Absolutely.
You naturally will get people to resonate with what the story you're sharing, the actions that you're doing, and the hope is that inspires more action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So talk to me. So what's next for you? What's next for the coffee shop? Talk to me a little bit. I cannot ask that question. Like, I want to know how you're going to continue to impact the community. So what's next? What's next?
The big dream is I would love to continue growing an inclusive company.
Okay.
And that can extend beyond coffee. Right now it's solely focused on coffee, and we definitely are planning to expand within the coffee space.
Okay.
There's a lot of exciting things that I think we can help accomplish. And so that's really where I am trying to drive this company forward. I'm trying to drive it forward to where if you ask me to talk about what's in my journal at home of like why I started this and where I want to be, I would love someday, and I'm not saying this will happen, but I would love someday to be the size of a national coffee chain that has a green logo, but have pay equity and employee equity at the top of my company mission and motto. And I firmly believe that if I can just hold true and build a company that removes that wage gap between the top level and the bottom level, you can really build a beautiful, powerful, and impactful company.
Yeah.
So that's my little, I feel like this is my little science experiment. I'm trying to see like, can I do this? I don't know. We might end up with a great company. We might end up with bust. But at the end of the day, I just need to know to go to bed. Every one of my employees, I want to make sure they're taken care of as well as I can.
Absolutely. So. Well said. So now I'm going to ask you about you.
Yes.
Right. So I always do this in all my interviews and get clear. I think it's good for us to, yes, we know you as the owner, but let's get to know Gabe. So what is the one thing you must have when you are traveling on a plane somewhere?
A good book.
A good book.
A
really?
good
And why
book.
is that?
I love, especially since, so I did a lot of education.
Okay.
I got a master's, so I did a lot of reading boring textbooks.
Okay.
So once I got done with all of that, I discovered reading for fun.
Yes.
Turns out that's
yes.
great. And I was lucky enough to discover that by the time I finished, there's this immense catalog, and it growing every day, of queer stories. And so I have just been consuming as much of that as I can. I feel like I'm almost getting to relive some of my childhood. Like that visibility, when we talk about visibility, that's visibility. I get to see these stories of people that are running businesses and finding love, and I see myself in those roles. And like, I've never really had that growing up, so it's just like almost get to relive my childhood by reading.
Is there a favorite book that you would recommend?
Oh, it really depends on the genre.
Okay.
One of my favorites, if you go sci-fi, is like there's a series, 2-book series now, Strange and Stubborn Endurance.
Okay.
By Foz Meadows. Love that book.
Okay.
Kind of blends romance with sci-fi and all sorts of fun little jazz.
Okay.
And then there's I feel like this is a loaded question because I have a lot of author friends that I've met through here.
That's not fair, right?
I don't. You wouldn't think it, but opening a coffee shop, we've met a lot of authors that are traditionally privileged. So it's like, I feel like if I
so don't call anybody out.
If I start naming any of them, I might miss
You might
one.
get in trouble. So let's not do that.
All of their books.
Okay,
you know who they are.
All of
they
them.
know who they
right?
are.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
So mine would be Driven Meat. So I'm not as deep as yours, but mine is I gotta stay alive. So Driven Meat, I get sick on the plane. So if I don't have Driven Meat, it is not a good situation for me. So lastly, I just want to give you an opportunity to anything you would like to share, right? Any last words in regards to what we talked about today, encouraging our leaders here in the community to get involved. Like, what would you like to share as we wrap up this conversation?
I think for me, if I was looking back to the corporate version of myself when I was working for a larger corporation, don't be afraid to stand up and use your voice. Your stories still matter, even if you feel like you're kind of at the lower levels of whatever management may be. Your voice is important. I would also say from just a daily way to show leadership, it's be thoughtful. The power of the wallet really is an important aspect of our society today. So know who you're buying your coffee from, or whatever your service is, and really trying to look out for those voices that need to be elevated, and how can you impact those diverse-owned businesses and make sure you're supporting them.
Well said. Well, Gabe, it has been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I really learned a lot about who you were and about the coffee shop, and I will definitely be coming and continuing to purchase. I just want to say to those who've been listening, thank you for joining today. And just want to say, Catalyze is a place that you can learn a lot more about how you can bring diversity, equity, inclusion, and principles of what we talked about today and the Valley Leadership principles of doing into driving your leadership journey to drive an impactful community here in Arizona. So again, Catalyze, make sure you sign up because we want you and we need you. So again, thank you, Gabe, for being here. And thank you all for tuning in today.